Hello everyone, welcome back to chapter 13 of my review, not my review of chapter 13. And today, this is a bit of a complicated one. This is definitely the most thought-provoking chapter yet. It's the most I've put thought into a chapter of Plagueis so far, aside from the facilitating anarchy, which I do have an answer for in this chapter. This chapter explains it. But I have actually started to take notes when I've been completely confused in the book. So I've got them up here, and I've had to do it for this chapter. Otherwise, I would have just been completely lost, especially with how much there was in there. Now. This is a bit of these notes are a bit messy, so I do apologise if I pause for a bit. I'm just trying to find I'm just trying to find what I'm looking for, and I really do need to get into these before I do. So while I am trying to look for it, found it. Anyway, I'm going to give probably my criticism of the chapter, and it's a very similar criticism to what I've proposed, to what I mentioned in chapter 8. I think it was chapter 7. I keep mixing up the two. Where in that chapter I said it was a little bit boring, a little bit of a snooze fest, with just it being a massive lore dump and not really doing anything to further the story, and it would have just worked better if we just got the information in moderation throughout the rest of the book, rather than having an entire chapter dedicated to it. And this is a very similar case to Plagueis teaching Palpatine. It's not that. I think the best way I can compare it is to Kreia in Knights of the Old Republic 2, and how she proposes a lot of questions and lessons that are really thought-provoking and are really interesting to think about, and it really draws you in. But for this, it just isn't quite there, I don't think. It isn't the same kind of thing as Kreia, where you're drawn in and you want to try and figure out what she's saying, and you understand what she's saying, and how, even if it doesn't quite align with what your beliefs are, she's correct. And the thing is, in this book, that isn't the case, unfortunately. It very much feels as if it's, I guess, just needlessly complicated, and this was the issue I had with chapter 12, where I personally didn't quite figure out what was. I personally needed to sit down for a bit to actually figure out what was being done to try and figure out the lessons of the chapter. And for more so in chapter 13, where this isn't a short chapter like chapter 12, it is a long chapter with the lessons being front and centre, and it makes it, again, a bit of a snooze fest. And it's okay, these are interesting things, but because of the needlessly use of complex words and making it unclear, it's stopping it from being increasingly interesting, I guess. And I think that's the main problem with the book, with Plagueis, and probably James was Tennis Fighting. I've only gone through Plagueis, but I'm only going through Plagueis. But he really likes to use lots of complex words and such, and as much as that can be useful in just a general conversation, just to keep it fresh, in stuff where you're really getting deep into something like a lesson, that's when I think you need to be maybe a little bit more blunt, because even though I've written down my conclusions in this, I'm still not entirely sure with them. Hopefully causing me to say my conclusions will help, but it's just needless. He just made it needlessly complicated, unfortunately. Anyway, we open up on a planet called, I think, Boyont. So and we have Plagueis having Sidious trying to trying to pretty much get him to get male people and to get the herd of wildlife that is there to pretty much make himself the object of their desire. In the words of the book, he's teaching Palpatine to become the object of their desire. Or as I've written down here, Plagueis teaches Palpatine that appear alluring. I should probably fix that because I put that's appearing alluring. That's to appear alluring. No, that appearing alluring. You know what I mean. That appearing alluring is that to appear alluring. That is teaching Palpatine to appear alluring, to get what he wants and what he needs and stuff. And he's testing that out on this wildlife, and he makes one of them come under his commands, and it allows him to and he allows Plagueis to kill him, and we get to see into that, and Plagueis starts to talk about that they are serving nature's purpose by killing the herd, and that this pretty much enforces the second part of that lesson, where it's you don't just need to be alluring, you need to be dominant, you need to be the predator. Something that is, of course, the dominant force. Now, then he gets into, once they have a break, Plagueis goes a bit into how he was into his wealth and how few actually know how wealthy he is. And how because most of them are taken from activities that have nothing to do with the business or finance. And he talks about that. Let me see. Here we go. And he talks about how people were wondering why he never got wedded, why he never got married, and they came to the conclusion that, well, he's just married to his work. And Plagueis says they said that without realising how right they were, except that my real bride is the dark side of the Force. What the ancients call Bogan, as separate from Ashla, Bogan being dark, Ashla being light, from what I gathered. And he goes on to talk about how even the Jedi understood that there is no profit in partnering with someone that doesn't understand what it means to be in service to the Force. Or as it's put in the book, in grip to what it means to be in the grip of the Force. And that the Jedi that's why the Jedi restricts marriage. And that's why the Jedi restricts marriage. There is no gain from in their eyes, there's no gain from having a wife or husband that just can't understand the implications and the power of being one who can wield the Force and what that represents. But he then starts to talk about how the dark side is the purity of the Force. Hang on. There we go. And he goes on to talk about how the dark side is how the dark side precedes the light side, and pretty much, and talking about how the light side is a distortion, and he's pretty much referring to the dark side as being pure, while the light side is a twisted version of the dark. And the ones such as the Ancients and Celestials and Rakata that tried to capture the power of the Force and force it to obey sentience life had faced very little recorded, have faced no recorded punishments in their work. And even though, of course, we know they did, we know the Rakata, for one, they lost their evolution removed their connection to the Force, at least on the scale they had before. But this basically allowed them to do so much, and the deaths of most beings were of most of the time of little relevance, and the Jedi grew too obsessed with protecting these not really important beings and strive for balance in the Force, forgetting that life is meant to evolve and change rather than staying one way. And they were stopping promotion of evolution to become stronger and such. In fact, I should write that into this. Anyway, then the conversation moves on to how the light and dark, onto the potentium theory, which is, I think, something a lot of people would probably perceive Darth Revan as. And his teachings, this definitely made me think of the Revan fan film, Rescue Mission, where it's describes that light and dark depends on the intention of the user, and Plagueis says, "This is yet another perversion of the truth perpetuated by those who wish to keep us shackled to the Force." And he talks about how the power of water and the power of fire are entirely different. Glaciers and volcanoes both have the potential to transform landscapes, but one does so by burying what lies beneath, where the other spews out new terrain. And Plagueis goes on to say that the Sith are not placid stars but singularities. Rather than burn with muted purpose, we warp space and time to twist the galaxy to our own design. And that's what he says. That's, again, I'm reading a little bit off the book here because I got it set up, because of how messy I've made these notes. Otherwise I won't know which order to say these in. So anyway, he tells Palpatine to become grand in power in the to become grand in power in the dark side, he has to be open to the power of the dark side. In the book he specifically says to become one of grandiloquent power, grandiloquent, there we go. Power requires more than mere compliance. What's needed is obstinacy and tenacity. Whatever. And as I've written here, he says he tells Palpatine to be open to the power of the dark side. That's as to become grand in the. He tells Palpatine to be open to the power of the dark side, as to become grand in the power of the Force offers. As to become grand in the power. Hold on. Sorry, I haven't worded it very well in here, but anyway, I put down, he tells Palpatine to be open to the power of the dark side and the currents it gives, as to become grand in the power that the Force offers. It as to become grand in the power that it tells Palpatine to be open to the power of the dark side. As to become grand in the power that the Force offers, he needs more than compliance. He needs to be stubborn and determined, because no matter how nimble he is or thinks he is, the Force shows no pity. So he constantly needs to be pushing and striving for that, and that really does kind of show why the Sith are always lusting for power. It's because it's because that without that lust they don't have any power, and I think that's interesting. Anyway, getting to once Plagueis stands up, he starts to go a little bit on a tangent about he starts to talk about Force lightning and electric judgment, and how they're similar, but it isn't true Sith lightning. And he talks on about how Force lightning can only be wielded by the Sith because they accept the consequences. I presume that is the toll it will take on their body, but it could also be other consequences, or be the other definition of consequences, which is importance or relevance, which would also make sense in these, and because they accept the consequences, and because they accept the consequence, and that they reject empathy. And to do these things requires a lust for power not easily satisfied. And this is also the chapter where we find out to use Force lightning you have to be hit by it, so that is a bit for those wondering where that source is from, chapter 13 of Plagueis, here you go. Page 4 of chapter 13. But yeah, they're talking about the strength of Force lightning now. It can only be wielded by those that accept the consequences and reject empathy, and they don't do those things. And to do that, they need to have a lust for power that is not easily satisfied. And it's interesting. I just lost my page in the book. Now I'm having to reference. Right, now I just gotta hold on a moment before I can continue. I need to find my next note. I should have made this cleaner. But as Plagueis goes on, he talks about having to dominate the Force pretty much. Let's see if I can find it for a moment. Let's see if I can find that bit in my notes, because it's definitely in here, but no, that's next. Not it. Now we've already gone over that. We've gone over that as well, and that. Here it is. Right then. Anyway, Plagueis talks about how the Force can't be treated fairly, and that the Force tries to resist the most ravenous spirits, or ravenous, whatever it's meant to be, that but that it must be broken and made a beast of burden to pretty much make it a servant of the wielder. And this is why the Sith try to dominate the Force. Hold on. And this is why the Sith try to dominate the Force rather than use it to their whim. I guess use it to their will, not only as an act of strength, but because it's the way to make the Force subject to them. And I think there's not much else for this part of the chapter. But as it goes on, they come to Hypori for a training session, and let me see if I can find it. Plagueis tries to teach Palpatine to familiarise himself with the properties and the peculiarities of the weapons he is fighting, so that he can best deflect and position himself accordingly to them. And he teaches Palpatine that he may find his life depends on his ability to focus on a weapon rather than the wielder, which I don't think it would be very realistic, but hey, oh well. It is a book after all, non-fiction. But Palpatine takes more interest in Sith tombs and holocrons, and pretty much the Sith tombs and knowledge from the great Sith homeworlds such as Korriban or Joan Cass, and Plagueis scolds him. And it's in a little bit of another spot of this. Unfortunately, I have these references into other paragraphs, but he scolds him because of, well, he's trying to rely on the teachings of the old, and he's just more interested in Palpatine's just more interested in the knowledge of the Force and the physical realm, as I've written here, displaying an imbalanced understanding that is important to not have in the material and ethereal realm, working on imagination, fantasy in the future, rather than keeping his mind in the present and reality. As at least in chapter 12, Plagueis is very forward-pushing, of present thinking, having a goal to work towards in the future, but not trying to plan ahead too much. You're trying to keep your mind in the present and present courses of action. And you know, you've got Palpatine there who is thinking ahead of what he could get if he went to those tombs, and the knowledge he could get if he went there. And Plagueis full well knows they were all looted years and years ago, and there is nothing left for them. And he asks if Sidious wants to be an academic, but Palpatine just wants to learn, and Plagueis tells him that he will, but not from fake sources and or as it said in the book, spurious sources. And he goes on to teach Sidious that he shouldn't rely on the teachings of the old, as and this is a really, I'm going to struggle with this, but they're idiosyncratic to the Sith who spread those teachings, which basically means it's stuck to the beliefs of those individuals. Those teachings are of the beliefs of the individuals, and Plagueis considered teachings from master to apprentice to be spreading real knowledge in the sessions that they have, as it contains information that cannot be forgotten. And he says Palpatine may want to consult the masters of the old in the future, but until then it will be better for him to not be influenced by them, with it being better for him to discover his power and his own way to perfect it in his own manner. and I've written here, discover his own power and perfect it in his own way, with the assistance of Plagueis, rather than learning from biased teachings, so that he can find his own spot in the dark side, rather than trying to, I guess, live up to something. And once they have that little training session, they go on to another world. I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called. What's it called? Cursed. And basically the people of Cursed, they kind of see the Sith as like these people that come to challenge them every now and then, and they're a challenge that has to be accepted to try and overcome, and they try to make peace with the Sith, but they always dismiss it. And anyway, Plagueis starts to talk about how he begins to ask Plagueis if... Oh, he also before we get into that, he talks to Palpatine about when he's being a bit dismissive of the physical of the weapons. I knew I missed something. But when they're on Hyperion, he's being a bit dismissive of the weapons, and he's wanting to learn from the old masters. Palpatine teaches him that someone who is trained in the killing arts, or someone who knows how to fight, will not make warning of their attack or the fact that they are a threat, and will strike unexpectedly, and it's Palpatine's duty to have instant reaction to that and be lethal and survive, as he is a Sith Lord and will be marked for death, as is said in the book. To those end little bits, for he is a Sith Lord and will be marked for death, that's in the book. The rest I can't switched up a little bit to make it a bit clearer. But anyway, they now where is that bit that I'm looking for? Plagueis, once they go to try and fight the hundreds of warriors that have come to face them for this time, Plagueis asks if Palpatine remembers Darth Plagueis' teachings on the killings of innocents, and this really took me a while to figure out. It did, but I've been able to kind of summarise it to: the killing of innocents strengthens their power in the dark side, and to grow in general and political power. And to grow in general and political power, they must interact with the many individuals of many species across the galaxy. Eventually, word of the Sith's mark of bodies will reach the Jedi. But as Palpatine kind of paraphrased it, he says not to bring death to those unfit to live, but that all Sith do must be in service to their true purpose, preservation and survival of the Sith. They must grow their power to accomplish that. They will need to interact with the individuals of many species across the galaxy, and eventually to accomplish that, they will need to interact with the individuals of many species across the galaxy, and eventually word of the Sith's existence will reach the Jedi. Now Plagueis tells him that the next few hours of fighting will test the limits of his agility, speed and accuracy. And we do know that killing innocents and those who aren't responsible does strengthen you in the dark side. We do know that. So then there's a big fight that breaks out, and it doesn't last very long in the book, but it would have gone on for hours according to Plagueis. So but eventually they've finished up their fight. to, I think this could be either in the previous section on the Hypori or here, but I think it's here. And Sidious starts to, yes, it's definitely here because of what's coming up. But Sidious starts to talk about, starts to recite a line from Darth Goyle, and he talks about how he compared the Sith to a rogue or malignant cell, too small to be discovered by scans or other techniques, but capable of spreading silently and lethally through a system. And initially the victim simply didn't feel right, then falls ill, and ultimately succumbs. And yeah, this is actually on Hypori, if I'm remembering correctly. And Plagueis goes on to tell Palpatine to consider the mindset of an anarchist who plans to sacrifice himself for a cause. For the weeks, months or years he lives leading up to his death, he lived in and was strengthened by the secrets he carries. And he straps a thermal detonator to his chest and dies, knowing the toll his acts will take of lives. And he likens that to the Sith, saying, "So it has been for the Sith, so it has been for the Sith, residing in the sacred place of knowledge for 1,000 years, and knowing the toll our acts will take." And he tells Sidious that was power, and he likens the Jedi to walking among the healthy, keeping a secret when they are terminally ill. And here it's, and I've written down, knowing the casualties the Sith acts will take in order for the Sith to rule. And I think I got quite close there, or actually got there with that. Anyway, later on, once they finish the fight, Plagueis and Palpatine have returned to having chats again, and Plagueis tells Palpatine that the ones currently leading the Republic need to be eradicated, and that the anarchy, this is facilitating the anarchy, and the anarchy and chaos they spread opens an opportunity to take control as it cripples, and using guiding intelligences to manipulate events and bring the Republic and galaxy into Sith control, who will make hard choices the Republic fears. And basically Plagueis and Palpatine are, whether Plagueis and Tenebrous went, they would facilitate anarchy, and the anarchy the Sith inflict on the galaxy gets rid of leaders that would prove complicated to actually take over, and so as their guiding intelligences manipulate events and they make the Republic a bit more of an easy taking. Now I do think I'm almost done with this. Now I'm getting a bit out of order here on the last bit, but we've gone over that. We just tell Plagueis to tell Sidious that the power of the dark side is an illness no true Sith would want to be cured of. And that's in the first part of the chapter. No, we've gone through that. We've gone through that. Going to go back through again quickly. Yeah, definitely, yeah. Here we go. Plagueis tells Sidious that power isn't always violence, but can be, and I quote, subdued with manacles of shimmer silk, purposeful charisma, and political astuteness. But he also reminds him a cunning politician is more powerful than two Sith armed with vibroblades, or force pipes, or lightsabers, and he tells Palpatine that he must become that cunning politician, and with Plagueis advising him from the dark. When Sidious asks, "Are we grand enough?" Plagueis corrects him and asks, "You should be asking, are we crude enough?" And he reminds Palpatine that they are not living in an age of giants, but to succeed they must become beasts. And the way I've interpreted this is that take Beast, turn that into Predator, and you got the idea. And so Plagueis is trying to teach Palpatine that political cunning is also power. Physical prowess is not the only form of power, and they must rise to be dominating forces, predators in politics. I think that's about it that I have to talk over here. If it's not clear, this was a very thought-provoking chapter. Obvious by the amount of notes I've had to take. I've written over 7 notes. I don't know the amount in specific, but it's taken up 5 pages of this Google Doc, and I have my font size at 15 and that Arial. So or Arial, whatever. I personally did enjoy the chapter, but again, I do think it was maybe a bit. I think it was maybe held back by the complex writing of James Luceno, or Lucino, whichever way it is. His writing can be here or there depending on the situation. I think just in this situation, his writing just wasn't quite there. But in other situations, it is here. It does work in certain situations, like conversations, and I do think it works fine in like the business disputes Plagueis and Damask Holdings have with people, the others. But I don't really think it works as well in the lawdom or education chapters. I'm going to call them education chapters because it's Plagueis teaching Palpatine, so may as well call them that. My tonight. I do think it is. I do think the chapter was good though, and the fact that I've spent over 2 hours. The fact that I've spent pretty much over 2 hours thinking through the chapter, and I will consider this video as thinking through the chapter because it is, because I do think it is a bit, it should be considered that, because I did think a bit through it, and I did actually try to record this before and then I completely forgot about certain stuff, but I do think it was an interesting chapter. It was a good chapter. It's just held back by James Luceno's writing, I think. If he was able to make things clearer, I don't think it would be as cryptic. I think that's the best way I can put it. Unfortunately, these kinds of chapters I think are where James Luceno just falls short, and it makes you, as much as I hate to say it because I am really enjoying Plagueis and really want to continue reading it, as much as I hate to say it, it does make you feel a bit turned off by the book and you don't want to continue going on through it. That's not just my personal opinion though. I know some people are going to love it, but I personally just didn't. I don't really enjoy these chapters, and it's definitely down to the writing. It's definitely because of the writing. I think Luceno enjoys using these words you never hear in a conversation, and it's fine in certain elements of the book, but when you're getting into something where it's of great significance or importance to in the form of law and history and of teachings, it really falls short, and especially when it's in abundance and not in moderation, it just doesn't work that well, unfortunately. Sorry James, but it doesn't work well in my opinion. The combination of the two, it isn't a good amalgamation in my opinion. But that is just my opinion, and it would probably it would probably just throw in inconsistency if he did simplify the writing just for these lessons and long history chapters. but yeah, it just doesn't quite sit well with me, I don't think. I mean, I'm still going to continue reading the book though, because it is amazing, but just for me personally, it just wasn't, this kind of chapter just wasn't quite to my personal taste. Now I can finally have a break, because I've been trying to figure out the lessons in the book for the past 2 hours, and I haven't actually had a chance to rest from reading the chapter. And I need to wait to just give myself time to be ready to get on to the next chapter. So I'm going to take that moment now. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This is the longest one yet, because of the amount of notes and things I had to figure out. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.